Austin, Sam Adams. So the beginning of the events that led to the Declaration of Independence in 1776, 1781. Of course, we had the war, the Revolutionary War. 1781 signaled the defeat of the British. The Articles of Confederation bound the 13 colonies together. In 1789, signing of the Constitution and beginning of the federal period. Early types of money, in the very early years, there was no coins or currency in the colonies, so basically it was commodity driven. Tobacco, furs and skins, wampum, anything that could be traded and had intrinsic value. Early years, the early colonial years, there was money that was printed for the colonies by the British using the British system. Of course, that's in pounds, shillings, and pence. And that's an example there, very early example.
The red one.
Pardon?
No. He's looking to turn the light off. The red one. Up high.
Okay, and then as more settlers came in from more British, Portuguese, French, Dutch, German, coins started appearing that could be traded. The one up here, the first one on the upper left is a Dutch lion dollar. The one next to it is a British silver 4 pence. And then the one at the bottom, Spanish dollar, was the most prevalent. And of course today our currency is based on the dollar. And that's the predecessor coin right there. Early years colonial, the first coin struck for the colonies was in 1616 called the hod coin. Of course, it's got the pig on the front. And where's Donovan Shilling? There's the reverse with a beautiful ship. Great coin. This was it's a copy. This is a reproduction here. And then the French and Indian Wars were long-lasting, bitter conflicts between France and England and their Indian allies. Now, if you think of New England, the colonies running up and down the East Coast, you don't hear much about, but New France was from the British, or from the Canadian Maritimes, all the way down through the center of the country, ending up down in the Gulf of Mexico, around Louisiana, which is why very big French influence down in Louisiana. And again, here's a medal struck by the RNA, 1937, to honor the 250th anniversary of Denonville's expedition. Now this guy, he was kind of like the governor of New France, Jacques-René de Brosset de Denonville. And he landed at Irondequoit Bay in 1687 with an army of 3,000 and marched on to Ganondagan and Victor to destroy it. And that was where they held the first 2 PGA tournaments on, going down at Oak Hill, and they passed through Oak Hill coming back, so.
I didn't know it was open then.
Yeah, well, it was. It was an early PGA version.
Oh, okay.
The rough was high.
Yeah, the rough was, was pretty tough. The greens you couldn't find, overgrown. I think that's like another course in Penfield. Okay. Okay, the advent of the British colonial currency was issued to pay for King William's War, the first of 6 colonial wars from 1688 to 1697. Other colonies followed Massachusetts Bay. Value of each colony's currency was not the same. So they all started printing their own currency for each of the various colonies, but it created trade issues. So, and a lot of it was issued to pay debts, which were retired upon payment and could not buy the equivalent value of gold and silver. So you really had an issue with it. It was paper, as it turns out. It was mostly paper, and that's how it was viewed. It didn't have that intrinsic value that coins have. And here's the first from Massachusetts Bay. Was the first one created. This one is dated 17th or the 16th of October, 1781 here. Okay, 12 pence. This is probably one of the most famous coins, the pine tree shilling, authorized by the General Court of Massachusetts Bay Colony. This coin was issued in defiance of British law. So this is kind of like the beginning, 1652 for the coinage. It's very, very neat coins. We have one in our collection, as a matter of fact. Early years, some of the early coinage, the any sixpence, 1652, elephant token, 1672, which we do have one of those in the collection, Rosa Americana token from 1722, and the oak tree shilling from 1660. So, beautiful coins of their time, and again, this is circulating currency as tokens during the time.
I think the elephant tokens were 1694, actually. Pretty sure. Look at the bird. Anyway.
Okay.
Whose portrait is that on the American coins?
George the Second.
Yeah.
George the First.
You weren't quite this good.
It's an ugly George. The Currency Act of 1751 in Britain, it restricted the printing of new issues, existing currency used for public debt, but not be used for private debt. If you look at any currency out now, it's for all debts, public and private. And really affected New England colonies very adversely. And now we get to the Revolutionary War period and Steve Eisinger, who fought valiantly.
Which side?
I won't say.
So I'll pick up the thread here. Am I in somebody's way here?
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Try to make some comments about the coinage and the currency and relate it to the history of the time, starting with the Revolutionary War. And I'll point out that we think of our current Congress as gridlocked and do nothing. Here's what the Continental Congress accomplished. They issued the Declaration of Independence. They established the Continental Army and funded it, and appointed George Washington Commander-in-Chief. They raised the money, not very effectively, but they did it. And they waged war on the greatest power on earth and won, and they signed a treaty with France. So this was definitely not a do-nothing Congress. The story of the coinage through the Revolutionary War and through the Confederate period is basically a story of chaos and confusion and ineptness and mistakes. It was kind of a trial by error, 2 steps forward, 1 step back process, which is really kind of painful to learn about. And I'll go through some of the aspects of it. Just showing some of the typical currency of the time. Move ahead here, I guess. So the Continental Congress met in 1775 twice and realized that they needed currency. So they began to issue, produce the Continental dollars. There were 2 emissions. The first one had denominations ranging from $1/3 of a dollar up to $20. And then later they brought out up to $80 bills with some very strange denominations in between. There was a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7
Keep on
dollar
going.
bill. There was a $55 bill, a $70 bill, and so on. The money wasn't backed by any bullion, and was minted in huge quantities, and began to lose value immediately. Lost 40-fold value in a period of 2 to 3 years to become almost worthless. A lot of you are familiar with the expression, not worth a continental. So during the actual war era, the money became nearly worthless. There was no coordination with the states, which continued to issue their own bills of credit, no standardization, and the British counterfeited. We had a little discussion of that earlier, and I'll say a little bit more about it. The British counterfeited continentals to try to devalue the dollar further. Next. A comment about local history. Where were we during the Revolutionary War here in Rochester? Well, there wasn't much action. We had more action when Denonville came and invaded and camped out on Oak Hill, about a mile from my house. The closest the action got to us in Rochester during the Revolutionary War was Saratoga. And Saratoga is pretty interesting. It's about, what, 200 miles east of here? The Battle of Saratoga was actually the turning point of the Revolutionary War. What happened was Burgoyne, the British general, brought an army south from Canada, down Lake Champlain and into the Hudson Valley. And his objective was to meet up with a force coming up from New York and another force moving east from this area, Lake Ontario, and they would divide the colonies and split New England off from the rest of the colonies. And at first it seemed to be quite successful, but when he got to the Saratoga area, the forces coming from the other directions did not meet him there, and he became entangled with the Americans there under the command of Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold, of Benedict Arnold fame. And in fact, 2 battles were fought in Saratoga, about 18 days apart. The Americans opposed the British, surrounded the British. The Americans had superior numbers. American militia fighters would show up every day, swelling the ranks of the army, and were put to use. And Benedict Arnold used a clever strategy to outfox Burgoyne and defeated him in these 2 battles and captured his entire force. This was the first big victory for the Americans, and of course gave them great morale boost and so on. But even more important than that, word of the victory got to Europe, and this encouraged the French to join in, and most importantly, loan money. Next. So the states continued to issue money, and here's some of the state money. Just point out a couple of things here. Different denominations. We've got 40 shillings, 4 shillings, $40, $40. And I also want to point out the kind of crude art. I don't even know what that's supposed to represent in a Georgia bill. Nice sheaf of wheat. And also this little phrase, to counterfeit is death. Next. So they were serious about it. Here's some more states' notes. Architectural themes, industrial themes, more counterfeiting is death, up there at the top, and more odd denominations. You can make a collection of state bills of credit, and these go on the web or in dealers for anywhere from like $200 to $900 for nice specimens. You could put together a 13-state set. Next. Here's symbols from the continental dollars. And I found this fascinating and kind of charming, and a little pitiful too. But each denomination had a symbol on it and a motto. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these. I've added the numeric denominations here to the pictorials. The first one is a basket sitting on an acanthus plant. Now, the symbolism of that is powerful. In the Revolutionary times, everybody knew what that meant. It harks to an ancient myth about the acanthus plant that grew up around the basket sitting on it, and it had great significance for an oppressed minority fighting back. On the $2 bill, we've got a flail and shafts of wheat. On the $4 bill, we've got a wild boar attacking the hunter. The wild boar was a peaceful animal that when provoked would attack. The wild boar represents America, the hunters, Britain. The $5 bill, we've got a thorny bush and a hand reaching out, clutching it, and blood dripping down. The hand's Great Britain and the thorny bush is America. Symbolism is a little blatant. $6 bill, we've got a beaver eating a palm tree, which I think is ecologically unlikely.
Are we the palm tree or the beaver?
The $7 bill is a nice picture, I think, a kind of Art Deco style of a thunderstorm, and there's a little patch of blue sky there, and it says Serenabit. I promised Susie Scopa I'd read Latin, which means it will clear. And we've got a harp with 13 strings. My favorite, next please, my favorite though is the $3 bill, which shows an eagle and a crane in combat. The eagle represents the powerful Great Britain, the crane is the weak America, the American colonies, but the crane is stabbing the eagle in the throat. And the motto says, exitus in dubio est. Did I get that right, Susie? Which means the outcome is in doubt. So this kind of gives you a little insight into the psychology. And I think these mottos were very important to people. You know, they didn't have TV and magazines and Facebook and all that. Yeah.
Why were the mottos all in Latin?
Well, I was talking with Susie about that earlier, and Latin was very important to the educated class of colonial America. They read it. She tells me Thomas Jefferson wrote poetry in Latin, so it was pretty current. And an educated person read and wrote Latin, and they put it on their bills. There were two sort of amazing anomalies for me to learn about anyway during the colonial, the war period. One of them was a lottery that the Continental Congress set up to raise money. They issued lottery tickets. The prizes were quite handsome, up to $50,000, which would be something today even. They sold tickets, but unfortunately sales were poor, the drawing never occurred, it was a scandal, and people lost money. Next. The other anomaly was the counterfeiting that we've mentioned already. The British mounted a very successful and extensive counterfeiting program and put a lot of bills into circulation. You can see the difference. This one's genuine, this one's counterfeit, and look at the shading, for example, in this pedestal and in the stars and in the clouds, quite a bit of difference. So if you knew what you were doing, you could tell which one was counterfeit. That counterfeiting is death business was no joke, and George Washington himself ordered the death of some British counterfeiters who were caught with a large quantity of counterfeit bills. Well, the war came to an end in 1781 with this famous picture, Cornwallis surrendering. Next. After the war, as we entered the federal period, the colonies, the new nation, lurched toward a coherent monetary system. There were some strange pieces along the way. Here's the Brasher gold doubloon, a very famous coin, issued in 1787. Yes? Just a cough, sorry. By E.B. Brasher, Ephraim Brasher in New York City, a goldsmith. This thing was heavy, it's weighty, it was modeled after a European gold coin, and there weren't very many minted. Nowadays, if you should happen to have one jingling in your pocket, it's probably worth about $5 million. The states continued to issue coinage, mostly copper. Yes, please.
How much did those Brasher weigh?
408 grains.
Which is?
Help me, John. What's the equivalent? I forget the exact conversion rate. We'll figure it out. States continued to issue copper, Almost every state got in the act, and some of these are well-known pieces. New Jersey featured the horse head and the plow. Here's Vermont, which had a nice landscape coin, and the baby face coins. Massachusetts continued the pine tree, and also featured a Native American, which is probably the first Native American to appear on American coinage, although we'll see more after that. Next, please. And now I have to talk about Robert Morris. Here is a real hero of the Revolution who is not well known in modern times. Next. Morris was born in England, came to America as a young teen, almost a preteen, grew up without a dad, went into business, and did very well for himself in Philadelphia. He worked for a business, and he became a partner in the business, owned it. He had a knack for it. For a time he ran slave ships, didn't make any money at that, but he did a lot of import-export, and he became extremely wealthy. By the time the war actually began, he was a patriot, and he generously gave of his own fortune. He was one of the two richest men in the country. Gave generously of his own fortune to buy blankets for George Washington in Battle Forge, and food for the Continental Army. He gave money to guarantee loans from France, brokered the loans. He is known as the financier of the Revolution. After the war was won, he became the superintendent of finance. It was said to be the second most powerful man in the new country, next to George Washington. He established the Bank of North America, which was the first overarching organization to govern finance and commerce, finance and coinage. Became a senator. Then he got involved in a bunch of land deals, bad land deals, that went bankrupt, went to debtor's prison. And Congress passed a law especially for him to get him out of prison. And then he died in 1806 after his remaining years in poverty and peace.
By the way, George looked up the weight of the brasher
Yeah.
balloon, and it's just under an ounce.
Just under an ounce.
0.933 ounces.
Thank you. So wait a minute, just go back a sec. Robert Morris made it onto a treasury note, a $10 silver certificate dated 1878. There's a local angle here. Mount Morris, New York is named after him. Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, and there's another Robert Morris University in Illinois. There's a Robert Morris Elementary School in Batavia. Next. He actually bought and owned at one time most of western New York. It's called the Phelps and Gorham purchase, which is this one here outlined in green, and a couple of other purchases that were on both sides of the Genesee River. And he owned this land. He bought it from the Six Nations and other investors. But that's when he went bust.